Hi, everybody. Welcome into Sports Talk Chicago. My name's Jon Zaghloul. Great to have you here on Channel 59.3, BPON TV, and Roku. Big news. The draft is over. How the Bears do. We'll break it all down in just a second. Before we get started, make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jon Z Sports and on Facebook at Jon Zaghloul. You to watch more of my show, search up Sports Talk Chicago on YouTube or go to sportstalkchicago.com. You to watch more shows from the BPON TV network. Search up BPOD TV on YouTube. I want to start today with this. Sometimes it's best to not make a judgment until you see the finished product. Easier said than done, I know. After day one for the Bears in the NFL draft this year, I was ready to lay into Ryan Poles. Who could blame me? The Bears preached and talked about building through the draft and finding ways to help out Justin Fields through the draft. They didn't do so during free agency. We all know this. So when I saw two secondary players being drafted right away by the Bears, although they had talent, although the picks were warranted to an extent, I was disappointed. A lot of other Bears fans were too. I was worried. If you follow me on Twitter at Jon Z Sports, I put out a tweet saying, oh, nice to see the Bears helping out Justin Fields. There was no help in the second round, even part of the third round. Ryan Poles did not impress me yet. I understood what he was doing, drafting the best player available, but even in the third round, hey, Malik Willis was out there. I'm not saying the Bears need a quarterback, but if you're following that strategy, Malik Willis was one of the highest rated players available, still left. They didn't take it. I'm not saying they needed to, but if you're following the strategy, stay consistent. I was concerned, especially for Justin Fields' sake. There was a report from Adam Johns saying that Fields and Poles worked together, looked at film to find wide receivers. I don't know how true that is based on what the Bears did at wide receiver in this draft, especially, again, day one. But I bit my tongue for the most part. I wanted to see what Poles would do in the later rounds. The Bears entered with minimal picks. They didn't really have much to work with. And Poles was pretty quiet the night before Saturday, talking about who the Bears might take and what they might do in rounds 5, 6, and 7. Wake up on Saturday morning and then look through Twitter Saturday afternoon and the evening, and I see trade after trade after trade. And the Bears added so many picks in rounds 5, 6, and 7 that I felt much better about what the Bears did. I looked at the positions they drafted, the guys they found later on, and my entire outlook on this draft changed. I'm not going to sit here and tell you the Bears had an A-plus rating and everything's going to be okay because we said that about Ryan Pace last year. We all said A-plus draft for Ryan Pace. They got Justin Fields, Tevin Jenkins, Larry Borum, Daz Newsome. Did it work? Well, yes and no, but not really. He was fired. But based on all the players the Bears got, based on the way in which they maneuvered in rounds 5, 6, and 7, based on the positions they addressed, Ryan Poles actually did a pretty good job. There's only one contention I have with Poles' draft, and we'll talk about it in just a second, but everything for the most part was smooth and well done. We're going to go through each draft pick right now, talk about what they bring to the table, then I will give the Bears my grade, talk about what it means for them moving forward and what it could mean for them coming this season already. Pretty interesting to think about. Number 39, Kyler Gordon, the cornerback the Bears took in the second round. Breakdown on him, he's a versatile cornerback. He's played both slot and outside corner. Gordon actually is not allowed a touchdown in 722 coverage snaps at Washington. Pretty impressive. He's fit, according to Bears Wire, likely a day one starter. He'll start opposite Jalen Johnson at outside cornerback, and he'll also make a contribution on special teams. I love this pick. I really wanted the Bears to take George Pickens at number 39. He was still on the board. They didn't. Same with Watson at 47. Didn't do that either, but this was a need that the Bears had. The secondary was atrocious last year. We can all admit to that. Eddie Jackson's a shell of himself. Jalen Johnson did okay. There were injury problems. There were guys, second, third string corners playing at one point. Remember the Green Bay game? I mean, there were problems for them in the secondary. This was a great pick, and this guy, Gordon, has a track record of playing lockdown defense, especially in the red zone, which is something the Bears desperately need. He has the talent, and he may even start game one, so he's NFL ready already. There's no need for him to really learn too much or sit out a couple of games or not start till midway through the season. He might be starting game one. The Bears pretty much, for a discounted rate, found something they needed. A cornerback on a rookie deal who actually played shutdown defense and went to Washington, played there for 4 years. Great move. I loved it. Wanted a wide receiver, but understood the thought process from Ryan Poles. 48, Jaquan Brisker. Brisker, a physically gifted safety, plays with aggression and relentlessness. As a defender, he's fearless against the run and has ball-hawking ability. He'll have the chance to play immediately on special teams, maybe find a role at safety to start. Likely a day one starter opposite Eddie Jackson at safety. Another good move. Again, wanted a wide receiver. Was hoping the Bears could do something for Justin Fields. But I understood the thought process once more. The Bears just completely upgraded their secondary in a matter of 2 picks. It took 2 picks for the Bears to bolster up their secondary from where it was, which was trash, to formidable, to decent, to solid. They needed that help, too. We saw what happened last year. These are 2 great picks, 2 talented players that the Bears picked up in the second round. Would have loved to see a wide receiver, but Brian Poles made some good choices at those spots. The first wide receiver and only wide receiver pick was at number 71, Ellis Jones. Now, the question about Jones is he truly a wide receiver in his age? Jones will be 25 on opening day. But even worse, or even more concerning, is that his pro comp is Daryl Patterson. Well, that's not a problem for the Bears in general. It could be a problem for Justin Fields. Daryl Patterson is more so known for his return ability, for his special teams ability, similar to Devin Hester. Devin Hester was never a great wide receiver. Did okay at a couple of decent years, but never really turned into what the Bears wanted him to be. What will Jones's fate be? We don't know. I know he has talent. 4.31 40-yard dash. But even this article here from the Bears Wire kind of exposes Jones. He's unpolished as a wide receiver. And he'll immediately fill the gap by Jakeem Grant. Okay, that's fine. That's the point of this pick. Ryan Poles wanted to fill up somebody on special teams who could return kicks and punts and maybe contribute a bit at wide receiver. Look, how much did Jakeem Grant contribute last year to the Bears' offense, to Justin Fields? Very little. Everybody knew Jakeem Grant for punt returns, kick returns. Same with Daryl Patterson. I'm not opposed to the Bears finding somebody to replace Grant. I mean, this could be a very good move. He's a rookie. He's fast. Special teams is an important part of the game. My issue is, the only issue with this pick, you're not helping out Justin Fields, really. Indirectly, you might be, but not directly. This is not George Pickens. This is not Christian Watson. This is not a big-time wide receiver who could be a number 1, if not a number 2, behind Darnell Mooney and be ready day 1 to make an impact. He's unpolished. He needs help at the wide receiver position, needs to learn it, and maybe he'll start game 1 to return kicks and punts, which is fine. No opposition to that at all, but the Bears needed to help out Justin Fields offensively. Give him a weapon. They did it. Not with this pick. He's a developmental wide receiver. He's unpolished. And that's why I put out my tweet on Friday night. What a great help to Justin Fields, because really these first 3 picks did not help out Fields whatsoever. I'm just being honest. Not really. That was my concern. The Bears, though, did make up for things later on in round 5. Braxton Jones, 5th round pick. Jones has played both left and right tackle, primarily a left tackle. He's a developmental project, but could work out at Utah. He's a depth piece for both tackle positions. The Bears could certainly use that. Dominique Robinson in round 5, an edge rusher. He's actually a converted wide receiver. Inexperienced, still learning the position, has a high ceiling. Get a chance to learn behind Robert Quinn. Maybe he'll start a little bit if Quinn gets traded or Quinn gets hurt. Another project, another big swing. Could work, could not work for Ryan Poles. Zach Thomas, round 6 at 186. 4-year starter at San Diego State. Another depth piece. He's played 3 different positions along the line, and he does project as a guard at the NFL level. He could start game 1. This is somebody who could be NFL ready. Needs to improve his pass protection, but he does add depth. Again, Preston Ebner, round 6, 203rd overall pick, running back. I loved this pick. The Bears need some running back depth. Just so you know, David Montgomery right now is probably not going to stay with the Bears much longer. Maybe another year or 2 at most. I don't think the Bears should extend him. You should rarely, if ever, extend running backs. And even if you do, you might end up getting burned. Ebner, great guy to have behind Justin Herbert. 4.4 speed, ability to catch the football, former wide receiver. He will provide Luke Getsy with some potential to work with. We might see him play week 1, week 2, Ebner. Versatile athlete. He can contribute at multiple phases of the game. Some comps have him like Deebo Samuel, even. So this is very interesting. The Bears don't go out and spend money on Deebo Samuel, nor give up draft capital, but they find somebody similar in the 6th round. Again, this could be a total reach by Ryan Poles, but I like the idea. At least he understands what his offense needs. Someone like this, now this could be a weapon for Justin Fields. If he gets playing time. And right now it's going to be tough, of course, when you already have Montgomery and Herbert there, but I'm sure he'll get snaps. I'm sure he'll get opportunities. He could line up as a wide receiver and or running back. He could do both. I like this move. Doug Kramer out of Illinois, offensive lineman. He's a center, a bit skinnier, 5-year starter at Illinois. Future starting center. Maybe not this year, but in the future. Ja'Tyre Carter, another offensive lineman, round 7. 4-year starter at Southern University. 37 starts at left tackle. Another developmental prospect. He will make the transition from tackle to guard at the NFL level. Elijah Hicks, the safety from Cal, another versatile defender. Solid depth behind Eddie Jackson and Jaquan Brisker. And he may also play special teams. And a punter, Trenton Gill. The Bears needed a punter. I like this pick. A lot of people criticize teams for drafting a punter, drafting a kicker, but you know what? Bears fans know, we all know how important both those positions are. You don't want another Cody Parkey or Eddie Pinheiro. Those positions at the end of the day could win or lose you games. Make fun of the Raiders all you want. Sebastian Janikowski had an 18-year career. And he kicked a lot from 50-plus yards and made those kicks. Had an iron leg. Gill was a 3-year starter in college. The Bears do have Ryan Winslow on the roster, so there's going to be a punting competition. That's fine. That's not a distraction nor a problem for the Bears. I like this move, to draft a punter with your last pick in the draft. So, based on all these picks the Bears made, I think Ryan Poles, conservatively, gets a B+, A-. And that's a compliment, don't get me wrong. That's not a criticism or a slight in any which way. The only problem I had with this entire draft, not enough weapons for Justin Fields as far as playmakers go. He did, fortunately, build up the offensive line. I loved all those picks. those are needed for the Bears. He helped out and made the secondary better just by a couple of picks in the second round. Didn't have to spend too much money. Smart. But there really weren't many weapons for Justin Fields. I mean, you drafted a developmental wide receiver in round 3 who's going to be 25 years old come game 1 and whose comp is Jakeem Grant or Daryl Patterson. And you drafted a running back who could be a Deebo Samuel-type player, but very late. We don't know what kind of contribution he's going to make game 1, or even this year in general, his rookie year. We don't know how much time he's going to get to play. Ryan Poles lived up to his promise of building the trenches. Lived up to his promise, too, of helping out the defense. And, I mean, that was a Matt Eberflus promise as well. Got to remember, these two guys worked together to find out who they wanted to draft. That's why when I saw these first couple of picks, safety, cornerback, everybody, including myself, realized, well, that's Matt Eberflus and his influence on Ryan Poles, obviously. Defensive coach, defensive mind, they're going to want to go after somebody on defense. They need help with the secondary, and they addressed it to their credit. And that was great. I just wish, personally, the Bears did more for Justin Fields from a playmaking standpoint. Look at the Bears wide receivers right now. Still, even after the draft, not looking too good. Justin Fields is going to have to throw now for sure to Darnell Mooney, Byron Pringle, St. Brown, and potentially this rookie, if he gets a chance to even play wide receiver. He's, again, comp to Jakeem Grant or Daryl Patterson. We don't know how many opportunities he'll get to play offense. Plain and simple. We don't know. Could be a lot, could be nothing. And that's the thing you got to worry about. Dallas Jones Jr. This one kind of made me scratch my head a bit. This was not the best player on the board at 71. So it didn't really align with Ryan Poles and his philosophy that he used for the first 2 picks. And even more than that, this is not a piece that will help out primarily Justin Fields. This is a piece that will help out special teams. More than anything, special teams. That's my one criticism. It's not a lot, really. I mean, at the end of the day, the Bears, I think, did a great job in this draft. And they did what they promised for the most part. I give them credit. They were honest. They were forthright. And they picked guys who they thought could help out their team. They shored up the secondary. They shored up the offensive line. They drafted a couple of reaches who could work out or may not. I just wish, in a perfect world, the Bears would have gone after more playmakers for Justin Fields. That's my only point of criticism for this entire draft. Maybe they'll go after people now in free agency, or they'll make a trade before game 1. Still possible. But I wanted to see more. I think the Bears' depth at wide receiver is going to be their biggest problem now. And it's better than having a wide receiver problem, an offensive line problem, and a cornerback and safety problem, for sure. The Bears X'd out 2 of those 3 issues easily. But one of them still remains. And when you talk about helping out Justin Fields, building around him, and you prioritize him as your quarterback, you have to follow through. They did not follow through in free agency. Now in the draft, they did to an extent, but not really. Pickens was there, didn't get him. Watson was there, didn't get him. Watson went to the Packers. Great pick for them, by the way. But see my point. Ryan Poles did what he needed to do in this draft, and he addressed positions that the Bears had problems with. Offensive line, secondary. But wide receiver was the one spot to me that he didn't fully address. A little bit scary. That's all. Because Justin Fields deserves help and needs help. And that's been my rallying cry for the past couple of months, for the past year even. When the Bears drafted Justin Fields at this time last year, I said, well, who's going to help him? Do the Bears have enough? They still don't. unless they make a major move, which is possible, and I'll take all this back, but right now they don't. And they didn't address enough of that in the draft. But I give Poles a lot of credit here. You entered the draft with 3 huge needs. Secondary, offensive line, wide receiver. You X'd out 2 of those categories immediately. You drafted some talented players in round 2. You made trades in the later rounds to help out your depth on the offensive line. I loved all of it. I just wish there could have been more help for wide receivers. For Justin Fields' sake. Got to remember, too, a lot of these picks, or at least some of them in the later rounds, are kind of shots in the dark. We don't know how any of these guys are going to work out. We talked last year about how great Herbert and Daz Newsome would be. One of them worked, one of them did not, and never really got an opportunity either. We don't know what's going to happen between now and the next draft, or between now and the end of the season, at least, to understand how well the Bears really did. So it's stupid to say, hey, they won the draft, hey, they lost the draft, because none of these guys have even suited up yet. Rookie minicamp starts this week. But on paper, 99% of the Bears' picks and their priorities were great. Ryan Poles had a very good first draft on paper. There just should have been more help for wide receivers. There should have been more help for Justin Fields. Maybe I'm proven wrong. Maybe Byron Pringle turns into some phenomenon. Maybe St. Brown exceeds 98 yards in a single season. I could be completely wrong. I'll look like a fool in a couple of months. But right now, I don't have enough information to prove that. Nor should I be believing in that idea. History suggests that won't happen. It could, but it probably won't. So for now, even though the defense might have gotten better, Justin Fields still may struggle, unfortunately. Ryan Poles gets a B+ or A-, and that's fine with me. And he addressed pretty much everything he needed to. But when it came to wide receivers, when it came to real playmakers for Justin Fields, I think he fell just a little bit short. And while that's not the end of the world, it did kind of contrast what he talked about before the draft. I would have loved to see a dynamic wide receiver. That's all. Everything else was great, and I was happy with the majority of the picks the Bears made. But as we sit here today, the Bears' number 1 wide receiver is still Darnell Mooney, and number 2 is still Byron Pringle. That's a little bit scary. And if I were Justin Fields, I'd be happy with this draft, but I'd also be wondering, well, I guess these are my choices. These are my top 2 targets. Yikes. I'm just saying. Would have been nice to have one big playmaker the Bears could have drafted and made big headlines with. They didn't. They opted for some defensive help, offensive line help. Great. I just hope for Justin Fields' sake that he has some players to throw the ball to next year. Right now, the Bears' wide receiver room is still one of the worst in the NFL. The offensive line got way better. The secondary got way better too. But their wide receiver room, their depth, still one of the worst in the NFL. Maybe Ryan Poles could change that between today and game 1. But if I were Justin Fields, I'd be a little bit disappointed in this draft. Not too much, because at the end of the day, at least he won't be getting sacked every second or third play. But still, they have to throw the ball to somebody, and the Bears really didn't address that fully. And unless they have certain plans for Jones or for other players they drafted, it's a little bit shaky at position right now. Jones's comp is Grant Patterson. It's not Antonio Brown. It's not some great wide receiver. It's more so kick returner, punt returner, and maybe a little bit of wide receiver. That's not what Justin Fields needs. That's the part where I'm a little bit worried and concerned. But overall, we won't know anything for 5 months, 6 months, longer. So at this point, we just got to be patient and hope that Ryan Poles made some pretty good decisions on draft day. Thanks for watching today's show here on VPod TV, channel 59.3 in Roku. Really appreciate the time. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jon Z Sports and on Facebook at Jon Zaghloul. You can watch more of this show. Search up Sports Talk Chicago, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, sportstalkchicago.com, and make sure you tune in right here every night at 10:30 on VPod TV. So long, everyone.